It's time to break out the spotlight. The NFL Combine is next week in Indianapolis, and the New York Giants own the 5th overall pick in the draft. How are things shaping up for them? We'll have a special guest with a sneak preview of the collection of talent heading to Indy on the Big Blue Breakdown live next. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live. So glad you could join us tonight. And wow, oh man, the calendar just keeps moving along, doesn't it? You know, every time we think we get a break, we really don't, because the NFL calendar is truly 11 months out of the year. Now, excuse me as I fight a little bit of the sniffles tonight. I do apologize, but better now than next week at the Combine, where it's going to be all work all the time. It's interesting to discuss what these teams will be looking at the Combine. So coming up in just a little bit, we'll have a live segment with All Access Football's Ric Serritella. He founded the NFL Draft Bible back in 2002, and every year continues to put out one of the more fun, easy-to-read NFL draft publications in anticipation of the annual selection process. So we're going to talk to Ric, get his scope out on exactly what he's looking for at this year's Combine, some of the sleepers, some of the obvious things, some of maybe the details and idiosyncrasies that he'd like to answer. But also, of course, we'll want to talk to him about how the Combine and the draft will match up with the Giants' potential needs. Again, the Giants pick 5th in the draft, and then after that, they pick at number 37 overall early in the second round, and they don't have a third-round pick because they traded it last year to get Jackson Dart. But I think we all know that was well worth the deal. All right. So let's see here. We've got your chats coming up over the course of the next 10 minutes or so before we get to Ric. Also want to talk about the fact that yesterday was Taggy Day in the NFL. That means franchise and transition tags are now able to be applied to guys who are pending free agents over the course of the next month. It is widely assumed that the biggest name free agent who will get tagged is George Pickens, the wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, just to get you guys caught up, in terms of key Giants free agents, and yes, there are a slew of Giants free agents. Handful of guys are at least starters, or if not, heavy rotational players. Like, for instance, Daniel Bellinger. He is tight end 2, but he plays an awful lot of the time. So, you know, I don't consider him, even it was with 45% of the snaps last year. That's virtually half. So he's kind of like half of a starter, right? All right. In any case, we all know who the key starters are. Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle, Nunez Roches at defensive tackle, Van Roten at right guard, Wan'Dale Robinson at wide receiver. These are all key guys who play an awful lot in terms of the regular lineup for the Giants. Cordell Flott, Daniel Bellinger, and Dane Belton. Those are the regulars per se, or pseudo-regulars, that are unrestricted free agents for the Giants. So here's the deal. They got to figure out what they can do with their salary cap. I don't see them transition tagging or franchise tagging any of these players. It is also my belief that Illuminor, Robinson, and Flott are going to wind up with bigger offers outside the building than the Giants can give them. And I think you ought to I hate to say this, Giants fans, but I think you ought to be prepared for the fact that those three guys just may not be able to make it back to the Giants this year. I just think, unfortunately, that's probably going to be the reality. Now, let's see what we can do about going through some of your chats. I do think there's a much better chance that they re-sign Bellinger. Belton, I don't know. I think that one's kind of iffy. I think Van Roten will be back. And let's see. Other than that, yeah, that's where I stand. I don't think Nunez Roches is going to make it back either. He's already a little bit older at 33 years old. I suspect the Giants want to get younger on the defensive line. All right. Isaac Moore, 1248 says, hey, P-Dot finally made it on time. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but okay, fine. Armand Duda says, combine time already. Yes, it is. Armand, it is combine time. That is right. Aiden Fink. Good evening, Paul. Everyone watching. Paul, good to see you make an appearance in the recent behind-the-scenes video on the Giants YouTube channel. Well, that actually, for those of you who aren't aware, the Giants are doing a feature series on the digital platforms called Behind the Blue. They did a 15-minute episode on the lunchroom and the folks who prepare the food and serve the food to the players and the coaches and all the staff. They did a section on the Giants Community Relations Department. They did a program on the Giants equipment personnel, the guys who handle all of that stuff. And the one that just came out yesterday was on the Giants radio crew, the game day radio crew, of which I am a part of. And yes, I was very glad to be part of it. You can see that on the Giants website, their YouTube channel, and I guess all of their other social media platforms as well. Armand Duda says, great guest. Yes, I hope so. I've known Ric Serritella for well over a decade now, and he's a really good dude, and always very excited around this time of year as he is trying to put the finishing touches on his NFL Draft Bible. And I can't wait to get him on the program because, after all, with the Combine starting next week, I thought there was no better thing to do than to give you guys a primer, because I know a lot of you guys are probably like me, right? You're watching so much pro football during the season. I admit to not starting to really study some of the top college prospects until we get to the bowl games and the college football playoffs. And then I start to cram, as I've already started to do now. And I go to the Combine for a week. I collect a whole lot of information then. And then for the next 2 months until the draft, I'm going bonkers. Kind of like a mouse chasing the cheese inside the circle of the cage. And that's what I do to try to catch up and at least have a semblance of an idea of what's going on with these prospects. I don't pretend to know what the scouts do, and I certainly don't pretend to know what these draft gurus know. Heck, guys like Ric Serritella do this 12 months out of the year. So I thought it was important, as we get ready for the Combine, that I bring on Rick and we find out not only about the Combine and the draft, but about maybe how it fits for the Giants. Are they going to be able to get what they're looking for? We'll see. Isaac Moore, 1248, says, got to get at least a third for Kayvon if he's getting traded. I don't think he does. Of course, if they get bowled over with an offer, that's another story. I personally believe that at $14 million, you have a talented player who's going into his contract season, his contract year, and is going to do everything humanly possible on the face of this earth to have a big season so that he can cash in on his next deal, be it with the Giants, excuse me, or somebody else. Well, you know what I say to that? For 14 mil, if he's going to absolutely go bonkers and have a huge season, that's a bargain. And you might as well have him do it for your team rather than have him do it for another jersey. David Cohen, 1991, says, would you consider trading Dexter Lawrence if you get a deal similar to what the Jets got for Williams from the Cowboys? Look, John Harbaugh came here to the Giants with the anticipation, okay, with the anticipation that they're going to make big strides this season. Well, if you're going to make big strides this season, you don't trade away Dexter Lawrence. You need Dexter Lawrence to play like he is capable of, like the all-pro candidate that he has shown, because by getting rid of him, you now make what is a porous rush defense all that weaker. So no, my answer to you is no. That would not do it for me. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to trade Dexter Lawrence. Not when you've already signed him to a big-time extension a couple of years back. Then you redid his deal a little bit last year. No, I think he's a guy with a lot of pride, and he's going to want to come back and bounce back and have a big season. And you want that big season to be in your jersey, not someone else's. Isaac Moore 1248 says that's a rich wide receiver tag like $28 million. Well, again, that's what I'm trying to tell you. I don't think the Giants are going to tag any of their guys, because I don't think any of their guys, necessarily are a good value at the tags. All right. David Cohen, 1991, says you might get a little more. He's still talking about a ridiculous deal, sending Dexter Lawrence away in a trade. I just don't see it. Armand Duda says, I see how Dexter plays next season before consider trading him. He was too good to give up on for one lackluster season. Look, I'll say this again. I said it all last season. Just because a guy says he's okay, says he's healthy, and he's not on the injury report, doesn't mean he was 100%. Okay? Remember, playing hurt or practicing hurt and playing injured are two different things in the National Football League. You can be hurt and not 100% and never show up on the injury report and never miss a game. But it will limit your effectiveness. I believe that's what we saw with Dexter Lawrence last season. Aiden says, Paul, I'm not advocating for anyone to lose their job, but what are some of the names you think the Giants would consider letting go to free up cap space? Aiden, here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Go to Over the Cap or Spot Rack, two of the websites on the internet that are free, and do a really terrific job of keeping track of players' contracts. I know they're not official, but they're pretty good estimates. They're certainly very close. Here's what you do. Go call up the Giants and their contractual situation for 2026. Look at how much the money is, and you tell me. You know enough. You've been around. You've seen the program. You watch Big Blue Kickoff Live. You can look at the list and you can say to yourself, okay, this is a big ticket player or a medium ticket player, and the production is not there, or injury history is a problem, or age is a problem. It doesn't take a lot to make a good guess as to economically which players would probably be in a gray area. That doesn't mean the Giants are going to do anything with those players, but at least you can connect the dots from a business perspective and say, I could understand where financially they might decide that there's a benefit in having that player leave. But hey, that's another story for another time, Aiden, and I do appreciate the comments, the input, and the loyalty to the program as well. It is time to bring in our special guest. He is from All Access Football, and Ric Serritella has been a friend of mine for a long time. He began the NFL Draft Bible back in 2002. Is that right, Rick?
Yeah, that's right, Paul. You got it.
That's a long time, even before you knew me.
Yeah, that's true. Going way back.
And he's with allaccessfootball.com. He has been scouting all of the All-Star games. He has been prepping his latest edition of the Bible. And of course, the combine is coming up next week. Rick, I couldn't think of a better time to have you join the program. And as always, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you once again.
Yeah, always an honor and a privilege to be talking football with you, Paul. And yeah, it must be draft season, 63 days away from the draft. Combine next week. Looking forward to seeing you in Indianapolis.
All right, first things first, I want to make sure people understand Rick is taking time out from preparing the Bible to talk to us tonight. So if while we're doing our segment, if you have something you really need to know, hit us up in the chat. We'll try to see if we can address it. But I can't keep him all night. Either his wife will kill me or he will kill me for keeping him away from the Bible.
Yeah, no, we're burning the midnight oil. I even shaved for the program. Anyone who tuned into my shows during the week, I've been roughing the scruff and dealing with the winter blues here in Jersey. And it's been a rough winter, but the draft season is bringing us good news. And Indianapolis is going to have some smoke, some whispers, some rumors, and a lot of fun. So looking forward to it. It's a dynamic draft, Paul, because not a lot of blue chip talent up top,
Right.
not a lot of franchise quarterbacks. And, with the Giants picking number 5, a lot of unpredictability. I think, I don't know if we'll get answers in Indianapolis. I think there's a lot of to be determined in this year's draft.
Well, of course, before I let you go tonight, I will ask you for a prediction at number 5, but we're going to put that on the back burner for just a few minutes. Let me ask you for a thumbnail, an overview, if you will, as to what you're looking for in this combine next week, what you expect to see, and maybe something that might surprise you, maybe a dark horse theme or a piece of news that might shock some people.
Yeah, I think the biggest storyline is probably going to be Reuben Bain's arm length. And you remember last year, everybody made a big deal about Will Campbell, 33 1/8. Well, this guy's going to be 30 inches and 1/8, maybe. He's going to come in under 31 inches, from what I understand. One NFL team ran the numbers. There's only been one defensive end in the history of the NFL that's had shorter arms. And I think it's going to be talked about and discussed. And I've spoken to scouts that have day 3 grades on Reuben Bain.
Wow.
So he can go anywhere from top 5 to who knows where. And, I like, the national championship, you saw him kick inside to the 3 technique. He's been adamant about playing the edge. So we'll see if he's open to that. I also want to see which quarterback emerges behind Fernando Mendoza, not necessarily a New York Giants storyline, but I like Garrett Nussmeier. I don't think people understand how injured he played at LSU this past season. And Ty Simpson has a lot of question marks in terms of his accuracy, being a 1-year starter. And I'm interesting to see, Mendoza's not going to throw at the combine. He's only going to throw at the pro day. He's not going to do any testing leading up to the draft. But I think it's wide open in terms of who quarterback number 2 can be. Cole Payton from North Dakota State's getting a lot of buzz leading into Indianapolis. So I think those are some of the storylines. And, there's some speed burners out there. Zachariah Branch out of Georgia, and Brennan Thompson out of Mississippi State, and maybe even Barian Brown out of LSU could challenge that 40-yard dash mark set by John Ross back in 2017. So I'm looking forward to a couple of storylines there. And, in terms of a sleeper who could emerge, I'll tell you what, this Jacob Rodriguez, I don't know if he qualifies as a sleeper, Paul, but this is another guy whose draft grades fluctuate. I've heard day 1. I've heard day 3. In my book, he's a first-round pick. Now, there's some concerns about his hip stiffness. And so that positional work is going to be very important to some talent evaluators. But to me, he's a first-round pick all day long. I loved what I saw down in the Senior Bowl. So a lot of great storylines to keep up with.
All right, so let's go Giants theme here. We all know that they were 4-13 last season, but their roster is got more talent than their record indicated. That's one of the reasons John Harbaugh took this job, although obviously Jackson Dart was a very big magnet as well. There's no doubt about that. It looks like offensively, we don't know what's going to happen in free agency, but Wan'Dale Robinson, I think he's going to get some money to go somewhere else. And Neighbors is coming off a serious leg injury, and they've got Illuminor and Van Roten as free agents along that offensive line. So if I said to you, Rick, let's put free agency aside, Are there pieces there at those spots where the Giants may need to fortify, keeping in mind that they've only got a first and second rounder and will not have a third rounder because they dealt that one last year in the Dart deal? So, we'll get to the defense in a minute, but I just want to talk about offensively. How deep are those spots if the Giants are going to have to make a plunge?
Well, I think that the offensive line is interior speaking is very good in terms of the interior offensive line prospects, and I think you can get some starting plug and play caliber type of players in that day two range. The offensive tackles are going to be tricky because I think all six. I did a quick look at my top six offensive tackles. I think they'll all be gone by pick 35. I don't know if there's a tackle worth justifying high enough at number 5. I guess Mauagawa from Miami would be the guy that I would consider there. But to me, when I look at the Giants, like in terms of core players, Jackson Dart, Malik Neighbors, Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, that's your core. And you want to build around that. So to me, I'm all about the trenches. I would use the first 2 picks, or at least consider that. We could talk about my first round prediction. I don't know if that player will be there, but I would look to build inside the trenches. It's a great interior offensive line class. It's a great defensive tackles you can get in day 2. I think there's some question marks on some borderline first round players, such as a Caleb Banks out of Florida, that you might want to look at round 2. Linebackers, are really deep and loaded. I mean, this linebackers is as talented and as deep as I can remember. And wide receivers, I think losing Wendell Robinson would not be a concern to me because it is a deep wide receiver class. And I think you can get a replacement there in the middle rounds. I know they don't have a third round pick, but early day 3, I think there's going to be some players who slide there that could be a Wendell Robinson kind of replacement. So, to me, it starts in the trenches. I don't know if you can justify offensive linemen in the first round, but I think in the second round, it needs to be one, depending on who's still available. But I think overall, the strong spots, edge rusher, center, and linebacker. What's interesting too, Paul, is we talk about the lack of blue chip talent, but the top caliber players in this year's draft are positions that have traditionally been devalued in recent years. So you've got Julian Love is a running back. Arvell Reese is a linebacker. Caleb Downs is a safety. So these are positions that teams typically wait on. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds at the top of the draft.
All right. You did touch on defense just a little bit by talking about the linebackers and saying the trenches will be strong. On defense, the Giants need to figure out how much that defense underachieved last year. I mean, they certainly didn't play well. They need to figure out, though, if some of those guys will bounce back, if Adebo will show what he showed in New Orleans. They need to know if Tate Banks can get his head screwed on straight and be the guy who deserved to be a first-round pick. They need to know if they're going to keep Bobby Okereke at a $9 million cap hit this year. If they get a positive vibe on all of those guys, then maybe they just need to reinforce the defensive tackle spot. And as you said, there looks to be enough of guys there. They could get one at 37, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I mentioned Caleb Banks out of Florida. I think going into the combine, as you know, the medical is a big aspect of the draft process.
And he's got the foot.
He's got the foot. So, but man, this guy is a man amongst boys. The way he was pushing people down in Mobile. I'll tell you, Christian Miller out of Georgia is a really good-looking defensive tackle prospect, too. That could be a candidate at 37, right? So those would be 2 players that I'm looking at. And if they don't go defensive tackle early, I'm going to give you a couple of players that I saw on the All-Star circuit.
Okay.
And James Thompson Jr. out of Illinois, I saw at the East-West Shrine Bowl, Paul. He was the most dominant player there. You're talking about knockback power, 6'5", 320 pounds, couldn't be stopped. And, another guy that really impressed me was Adam Graves out of Iowa. I saw him at the American Bowl, and then I went and dug in on his background. This guy is just, his pedigree is built for John Harbaugh. You talk about 3-time state champion in football, all-state baseball, all-state basketball, all-state shot put. Anything this guy touches, he wins. And I'll tell you, man, he's just got violent hands. He's got a quick get off. He's not going to wow anybody in the physical testing department. But man, Aaron Graves is a guy you want to keep in mind come day 3 if the Giants don't address that early on.
Now, I don't think there's any way that Hunter out of a Texas Tech or Jackson out of Florida State could possibly get to the 4th round. Am I correct?
No, Lee Hunter's an interesting guy. I tend to believe he's a top 20 player in this year's draft. I know he's been dubbed a 2-down player and has to improve his pass rush. But I'll tell you what, Paul, this guy's a dominant force. He's been doing it all season long. I think he has flashed the ability to show some pressure from the interior. So I think Lee Hunter is a 1st-round pick in my book. Darrell Jackson, probably looking at, top 100, top 50, possibly. Yeah. He's just a large man, large human being, run stuffer. So yeah, it's a good looking defensive tackle class, but these guys tend to come off the board a little bit earlier.
Now, one of the positions that we always like to try to grab early in the 1st round are really good corners. Does not seem to be a great corner class, Rick. And again, with the Giants having a lot of question there, Cordell Flott is a free agent. I think he's going to get big money to sign somewhere else. And then we got the other 2 guys I mentioned before, Banks and Adebo, who need to bounce back for the Giants to enhance that defense. What are we looking at here in terms of the possibility? How deep do you have to go before you run out of corners who could actually do something as a rookie?
Yeah, I think you're looking at probably about 8 or 9 guys, I think, that can make an immediate impact here. And it's interesting because of those 8 or 9 guys, only 2 of them are above 6 feet tall. This is a really undersized cornerback class. Mansour Delaney being one of them, just a shade under 6 foot out of LSU. And to me, he's the premier cornerback. I loved him at Virginia Tech. And what he did this past season, playing through some minor injuries there, by the way, just an incredible body of work. I think he's going to be a top 10 corner in the National Football League. Then there's a big significant drop-off, as you alluded to. Avian Terrell out of Clemson, I think, is the most polished cornerback in terms of just experience, pedigree, being able to contribute immediately and possibly play the boundary. Jamard McCoy is an interesting case study. He had the ACL, didn't play all season. A lot of people I see have him in the top 20. I'm going to, kind of wait and see if we hear anything surrounding his medical. He sat out. He hasn't played a game in nearly 2 years. By the time he hits training camp, it's going to be quite a layoff. So there's a little bit of risk-reward proposition there. And then you got guys like D'Angelo Pons out of Indiana, 5'8" corner, plays much bigger than his size. Reminds me of a better Dante Dion. And Keith Abney is another one of these undersized guys that's a slot cover corner out of Arizona State. But one guy, that I think is going to go on day 2, Chris Johnson out of San Diego State, 6 foot, 185, really good looking player, had a strong Senior Bowl, cover man. He's just been making plays, and he's been stacking up and lining up against all sizes, shapes, speeds, and he's been holding his own. So that's just a couple guys to keep. Keontae Scott out of Miami is another interesting player. He made some big plays for the Hurricanes in their championship run. And if you do want to look at, later on in the draft, this Davison Igbinson from Ohio State, I noticed when I was polling wide receivers at the various all-star games, and I would ask him, hey, who's the toughest guy you matched up against this year? Who really gave you a tough time? And Davison Igbinson from Ohio State, he had a brother who played at Rutgers. His name came up quite a bit, and he significantly cut down his penalties. He had 16 flags 2 years ago. Most penalized corner in the country. They must have put some oven mitts on him in training camp this year because he cut him down. I think he only had 4 or 6 penalties this year. But Yeah, it's not a top heavy class, but if you're trying to slide somebody in the nickel spot, it could be a very lucrative class. But I think you're going to have to pick and choose your spots wisely with this year's cornerbacks crop. And I do have to mention, I'm sorry, Avery Smith out of Toledo was the best cornerback that I saw at the East-West Shrine Bowl. I really didn't know too much about him going into the event. I didn't watch too much of Avery Smith out of Toledo, but that's a guy to keep an eye on in Indianapolis that I think can really raise his draft stock.
Now, I got a young guy who I was kind of thinking of maybe in the range of 37. You tell me if I'm crazy or not. And I know he didn't have a good week at the All-Star game. That's Hood out of Tennessee. He's a 6-footer, and I know he was kind of inconsistent at the All-Star practices.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at a guy that he may need a little work and a little polish, but I like his skills, Rick.
The tools are there: physical, speed, quickness, instincts, can gamble a little bit too much. Yeah, he needs some work on his technique. I didn't see it there in Mobile. I was waiting for it, but there is a lot of love within the scouting community. I think 37 would be a little too rich for my blood personally.
Okay.
But I can understand it,
All right, I got to ask you about that other defensive back who a lot of people have been talking about. He's a safety. He is the son of former Giants running back Gary Downs.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, we come into that whole problem about positional value because Eric Berry and Sean Taylor are the two highest ever safeties taken at the 5th overall pick by coincidence. So Caleb Downs, tell me, how great can this guy be? And does he warrant, if you're going to deal with that whole positional value question, the possibility of being the 5th pick in the draft?
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, look at what John Harbaugh did with guys like Ed Reed and Kyle Hamilton. You want that caliber of player. That's what Caleb Downs is bringing that to the table. Can play either safety spot. He could freelance play center field. He could play in the box, stuff the run. Just all over the field, ball hawk, instinctual. You saw what he did for Alabama. Then he goes and does it for Ohio State. This guy, all he does is shine on the big stage. So to me, I mean, we can get into the Giants' options at number 1, but to me, Caleb Downs is the best player pound for pound in this year's draft. So I throw everything out the window when it comes to positional value, team needs, and when you're picking in the top 5, give me the best available player, baby. Let's plug and play. Let's go.
So you're thinking there's a chance he could go before 5?
Oh, absolutely. I think, again, who are we talking about? Ruben Bain, Arvell Reese, Julian Love, David Bailey. Are you telling me Caleb Downs is better than all those guys?
Okay. Well, we know Mendoza's going to the Raiders, so that's one box check.
That's pretty much a lock.
All right, let me ask you if you could compare the upside, and I only want to keep you a few more minutes, Rick, because you've been very generous with your time. If you could give me the upside, Downs' upside, and you've already expressed great admiration for him, but how much upside are we talking about with a guy like Stiles or a guy like Reese? We're talking about, two guys in that second level of the defense who could be really, really good. Is their upside so good that you would also maybe discount the positional value with Reese because he's an off-ball linebacker?
I would. And, for whatever it's worth, I actually like Sonny Stiles better. And I know Arvell Reese is kind of the consensus favorite, and a lot of it is to do with his pass rush ability, and he's flashed that. But I don't think that's what he translates to at the next level. I think there's a lot of work to be done there, and I don't think teams are going to utilize him as a feature role pass rusher like a Micah Parsons. I think he's more of an off-ball linebacker. Sonny Stiles, to me, I'm interested to see what he times in Indianapolis because from my understanding, he's been timed in the 4.4 range. So Sonny Stiles is faster than most of the running backs out there. And you talk about size, you talk about speed, sideline to sideline lateral ability, physicality, violence, leadership, NFL bloodline, the son of Lorenzo Stiles. So, and they have Lorenzo Stiles Jr., the safety, who's also in this year's draft and is a kick returner. But to me, Sonny Stiles, I believe, translates to the better pro prospect. I understand Arvell Reese was dominant this past year, and he was shot out of a cannon. I get it. But to me, I like Sonny Stiles a little bit more than Arvell Reese. They're neck and neck. Don't get me wrong. They're right there neck and neck. But to me, they're both top 10 caliber prospects. And I would personally put Reuben Bain in there in that equation along with Jordan Love. And I like David Bailey out of Texas Tech. I think those are kind of your
Right.
cream of the crop, tier 1 level talents.
Yeah, Bailey being a pass rusher, an edge rusher for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me ask you about the wide receivers. You said before that you can get one later on, but who do you see is the best receiver? I'm a big Tate guy out of Ohio State. I admit that.
Mm-hmm.
I could see considering him at 5. Do you think that's too rich? Do you think there's another receiver who should belong in the top 5?
I think he's just as good, or if not better, than Emeka Ibuka. So if you told me you can have that caliber of player at 5, I wouldn't hesitate to do that. I'm a big fan of Cornell Tate. He has size. He has route running ability. The way this man tracks the ball is incredible. And you just seen the factory that is Ohio State. What's incredible is we'll be talking about his counterpart in an even higher level of esteem next year in Jeremiah Smith. But for this year, to me, Cornell Tate is 1. I then have Mekhi Lemon out of USC, who I do believe is going to be a slot. So we'll see if he loses a little bit of value in that perspective.
Yeah, me too, Rick. I see that too. He's a slot guy.
And then Jordan Tyson, he's got a lot of injuries. That makes me a little bit leery. The guy's always hurt, and I don't want to worry about that when I'm taking a guy in the first round. Now, another guy who's hurt is Chris Bell out of Louisville, and I saw him in training camp 2 years ago. Man, this guy was unbelievable to me, and I wouldn't be surprised. He's a bigger version of Steve Smith. His play style reminds me of Steve Smith, but he's 6'2", 220. This guy's a monster. You're talking yards after the catch. I know Louisville doesn't get a lot of mainstream recognition, but this guy, I would not surprise me if Chris Bell out of Louisville winds up being the best wide receiver in this year's draft. And Zachariah Branch reminds me of Deshaun Jackson. But to your point, Paul, some guys that I would consider later on in the draft, and I don't know how far Malachi Field shoots up. He had a great Senior Bowl, but boy, he would be a great compliment to Malik Neighbors.
And I love him too, Rick. I'm a big Fields guy. I don't notice the Giants don't have a pick in the 3rd round. Does he possibly get to the 4th? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's probably not likely. Maybe a Ted Hurst from Georgia Southern gets to the 4th. Now, I want to give you 2 day 3 guys that I would be heavily interested in. Yeah. So if you lose Wendell Robinson, give me Xavier Thomas from LSU. Plug him into the slot. He's a weapon. He can stretch the field. He's a speed burner. He can beat you on the end arounds. He can take a bubble, turn it into a first down in the blink of the eye. Xavier Thomas is a weapon. And I'll give you another guy, Caden Weegan out of Iowa.
Yeah.
And here's why I like him. Because not only does he give you a slot option, and by the way, he was unguardable at the East-West Shrine Bowl. He won every single one-on-one rep, and he won it by a wide margin. I mean, he can separate now. And I don't know what I was doing with him on offense because he didn't have a lot of touches. But I'll tell you this. I can't remember. There's a kid, Trenton Holiday, I think, out of LSU way back.
Sure.
Yeah.
I remember him.
I can't remember a more dynamic kick returner coming out of college in recent history. This guy is unbelievable, man. And I think he would just change the dynamic. I think you saw with the rule changes last year how much more special teams means. Not only does he give you a slot option, but he changes the dynamics on special teams and can flip the field. And I think, Caden Weegan on my personal big board is a 2nd round grade, but he'll probably go late day 3.
Okay, final question before I ask you for your Giants prediction or your pick for them. You mentioned before the offensive line. You don't think that there's a primo offensive lineman that deserves to be that high. Of course, Manoga is getting a lot of ink. So does Fano. If you're the Giants and Illuminor gets away in free agency, which I think is possible, they got Marcus Bowe. You scouted him last year. You know the Giants got him in the 5th round. Looked like he showed a lot of good flashes last season. Is the upside of Marcus Bowe good enough that you would feel okay to plug him in at right tackle if Illuminor doesn't come back, rather than take a stretch and push one of those two linemen in the 5th pick?
Yeah, I'm a believer in Bo. I would give him a shot rather than reach an overdraft, because I think, again, going back to draft philosophy, I think you get hurt, especially in the top 5, when you start picking need over best player
Right.
available.
Right.
Right? You want to do that later on down in the 1st round, that's fine, but you're picking top 5 for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? And so you want to
I
get
know all
better.
too well, Rick. I know all too well.
So I mean, Francis Mauigoa from Miami, like, I wouldn't be too upset about it, but I would probably be disappointed in some of the players who were still available on the board, right? And to me, like, I like Caden Proctor out of Alabama. I'm a big fan. I think the 2 Utah guys, Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fanu, go pretty early. Monroe Freeling, I think, is in the back end of the 1st round, and Max Ienhacker from Arizona State. I mean, he's a true right tackle, but I think there's going to be a home for him in round 1. If not, the Patriots in round 2 could be looking at him. So, if he can slide to the Giants at 37, that would be a dream scenario to me. That'd be a plug and play, ideal scenario. Max Ienhacker from Arizona State would actually possibly even be an upgrade. He's that good, I think. He was the highest rated tackle in the Blesto spring grades for whatever. I mean, that carries weight. So,
okay.
I'll give you another guy too, man. Emil Wagner from Notre Dame, 6'5", 300. He's a plug and play starter. I can guarantee it. I saw him at the East-West Shrine Bowl. This guy's fundamentally sound, lateral movement, great bend, awesome hand placement. Emil Wagner is going to be a day 1 starter. Nolan Rucci, who was not invited to the combine out of Penn State, very good looking player. So that would be a day 3 developmental guy I would look to develop if you go in later in the draft. Like Nolan Rucci, you bring him in playing behind Bo, I'd feel good about that. But Emil Wagner was really impressive looking. I like this young man. I think he's worth noting. Austin Barber from Florida is a guy that, maybe at 37 the Giants could consider, but it's going to be tough. These offensive tackles, like, I would truly, honestly, maybe only put 2 or 3 1st round grades on these guys, but the trends of the league, these guys get pushed off the board. It's hard,
Well, and that's the thing. And geez, I know I'm stretching your time here, Rick, but
no, you're good.
Tackles, the Giants may wind up needing a guard too. I mean, even if Bo can plug into a space that Illuminor vacates, Greg Van Roten, it's no guarantee he comes back for another year. And by the way, he's been steady for the last 2 seasons. He's played well. But there's no guarantee that he comes back for another year. They may need to find a guard next to the right tackle spot. I haven't really heard anybody talking about guards in this draft.
Well, I like this guard class, and Ione from Penn State is the consensus guard, and I'm not sure he goes in the 1st round. Maybe he's a candidate at 37. Emmanuel Pregnon from Oregon, really big, polished player, experienced. I think he's probably a little bit too rich at 37, but I like him and Bo Stevens out of Iowa as my number 2 and 3 guards. A lot of people like Chase Bisonis from Texas A&M. I think those are your top 4 right there. And then after that, you're looking at guys like Trey Zune from Texas A&M. He started at tackle. He's going to have to play inside. Again, 31-inch arms. Caden Barnett out of Wyoming, day 3. Plug and play, Paul. Book it. I saw this kid at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Lights out, just playing at a different level. Ironically enough, didn't get an invite to Indianapolis.
Wow.
And, it's important to keep in mind that last year, in terms of non-combine invites, no player not invited to Indianapolis got chosen higher than the 6th round. So Caden Barnett might be a guy out of Wyoming to keep an eye on.
Very, very interesting. All right, Rick. Well, it's time now to get your prediction for the Giants at number 5. Do you want to explain how you got there by telling us who you think the first 4 picks are going to be? Or do you just want to tell me who your number 5 is?
Yeah, so I think the Las Vegas Raiders are going to go Mendoza from Indiana. I think we all can put that down in pen.
Yeah.
Right? We can put that one in
In fact, black marker.
Yeah, the next ones will be in pencil, but to me, I'm just going to trust my eyes right now, and Ruben Bain has just been such a dominant force.
Wow.
I'm going to put Bain at number 2, and color me crazy, but I just think he's a top talent. And again, I like him at 3 technique. I'm not sure if he's willing to slide over, kick inside.
Right.
But I think at 3 technique, he could be a Pro Bowl, maybe an all-pro caliber type player. At number 3, Arizona Cardinals, I'm going to go Julian Love out of Notre Dame.
Right.
Jeremiah Love.
I think you said Julian a few times before. I was going to let you go there because, after all, we both have an affection for him.
Yeah, a lot of names rolling around in the head, And then I'm going to go Tennessee Titans, Bailey out of Texas Tech.
Okay. And I understand that. He's a dominant edge rusher. I could see that. The Love pick's a little interesting because I argued for Saquon Barkley a few years ago because I thought he was that special and that much of an offensive weapon, not just a running back. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I feel that strongly about Love, even though he's the best running back in this draft. I can't push him up that high.
Well, how do you feel about his prospects in comparison to Ashton Genty, who was the number 6 pick?
Yeah, and I get it. I'm worried about his pass protection. I'm worried about his power. I think he needs to run with more power. And quite honestly, Rick, I think sometimes, as much as I like him, I think he's a heck of a player. I don't think he showed a lot of patience sometimes. I think sometimes he just pushed himself too quickly into the hole and didn't let the runs develop. I don't see him as, yellow jacket guy.
Yeah, well, it's valid. I think I saw some of that early on in the season. I think he got stronger as the year went on, but I do think he has the ability to be a top 10 running back in the league. And I think when you look at the Arizona Cardinals, they had all their running backs were injured last year, right? Connor went down, Benson went down. They had guys off the street, and now they don't know what they're doing at quarterback. Is it going to be Kyler Murray? Is it going to be Jacoby Brissett? Is it going to be somebody else? So you're going to need somebody to alleviate that stress from the quarterback position. So that's why I'm justifying Love at 3.
I got you.
So that brings me to the Giants.
Yes, it does.
And the dream scenario. And, I've gotten some pushback on this. And, hey, we've already got 2 starting safeties. What do we need Caleb Downs for? But, man, this is a guy you just make room for, right? And you find a way to get the best players on the field, whether that means moving Holland to the nickel or, using him in a rotation. Caleb Downs, like Tyler Nubin and Javon Holland are not in the same stratosphere as a Caleb Downs. And we talked about a Kyle Hamilton or an Ed Reed type of impact for this John Harbaugh defense. To me, Caleb Downs is the ideal dream scenario. You're getting the best player in the draft. And number 5, that's premier value. So to me, it would be Caleb Downs. Now, if Downs was off the board, I'd go Mansour Delane. Let's shore up the secondary. Let's give ourselves a lockdown corner because the pass rush is attached to coverage and vice versa.
Right.
So when you have better coverage, you have more effective pass rush, right? When you have an effective pass rush and competent corners, you get more turnovers. So give me Mansour Delane as my number 2 option. And if they're both off the board, I would go Cornell Tate because Malik Neighbors, he could come back better than he was before the injury. But let's be honest, that's 12, 16, maybe 24 months until we actually see him get back to that pre-injury form. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm no doctor.
We don't know.
I'm not expecting him to come in week 1 and be what he was. That's just me. So
right.
I think having another weapon there would really help that offense, help Jackson Dart because he really needs an out. And so to me, those would be my top 3 options. Now, one player I did not mention that I think would fit Harbaugh's mold.
Okay.
Maybe I did mention Jacob Rodriguez. We did
You
talk
did
about
mention
him.
him before. Yes.
And, he's a guy that really, I don't know where he's going to go in the draft, Paul, but I would like the Giants to pursue Jacob Rodriguez if he's on the board at 37.
I'm going to ask you before you go, because everybody does seem to believe that Downs could be the next super duper star game changer at safety, which, as we all know, those guys are very rare and hard to come by. Poke holes in him for me. If you had to nitpick, poke holes. He hasn't caused a ton of turnovers. Is that the only thing that we could do to downgrade him?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of holes in his game. I think, you want to get picky on the pass coverage and say he could do a little bit better job, sure. I see a complete player, and
Yeah.
I'd have to pull up my report for the flaws, but I mean, there's not many of them. This guy is the real deal, And and you mentioned the yellow jacket, right? If I were to predict one player 20 years from now that we're fitting for that yellow jacket, Caleb Downs would probably be that guy.
He would be the guy.
Yeah, he really stands out to me, I think, and especially in this year's draft class. I think when you take a look at the drop off to the next player, I mean, it's the biggest fall. I mean,
well, just the other day, I forget who it was John Harbaugh was talking to on one of his Car Wash podcast guest appearances, and he was asked about Downs. I think it was with Dan Patrick, it might have been. And he just gushed over him. And you could see how much he respected the player, admired the player. And he said, oh, yeah, sure, if he was there, I'd love to have him. Now, he may have been just talking off the top of his head, but it certainly looked like he was excited by the name.
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised by that. And I think that he's a big, firm believer in being strong up the middle. And I think you need to be strong up the middle at all 3 levels. Right.
Yep.
And so, the secondary, I think, needs to get better, more specifically at cornerback. But I think Downs just makes you a better team. And again, we talked about it at the top of the show. You got about 5 foundational building blocks. You draft Caleb Downs, now you got 6.
Awesome stuff. Rick, where can people find your stuff, whether it's online digitally, or, of course, where can they also get a hold of the NFL Draft Bible as you try to put the finishing touches on this once I let you get back to work?
Yeah, I'm going to be curious to see where we land. I just got done polishing 271 profiles in the can. We probably got another 300 or 400 to go. That's going to be coming out in April. We'll have a hard copy edition this year. You can go to allaccessfootball.com. We've got daily draft updates. We got pro day dates. We've got combine previews. We've got all the all-star game coverage if you missed out on any of that. But we're doing live stream shows, and it's all over at allaccessfootball.com. I really appreciate that, Paul.
Rick, I'm just impressed that you don't have more gray hairs with all this work that you do.
No, they're there, Paul. You got to just,
I'm better than that than what look at all I've lost. All of these Giants losses for the last decade. Look what they've done to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you went all off. I just try to trim it down so you can't see them in there, but they're in there, man, But you'll get an up-close look next week in Indianapolis. Maybe we'll cross paths at the St. Elmo's shrimp cocktail fest I got going on over there. But always a pleasure, Rick. Man. Love chopping it up with you.
Always great talking to you. Ric Serritella from allaccessfootball.com. He is the founder of the NFL Draft Bible, and pick up yours when you get a chance before the April draft. Rick, thanks so much, and I will see you next week.
Thank you, my man.
Awesome. Great stuff from Ric Serritella, and I hope you guys enjoyed that draft preview coverage as well, the combine preview coverage from one of the guys who has been doing this for a long, long time. Want to get to your chats, and by the way, Jason Benjamin, 7754, becoming a super user. And thank you very much to Jason. Very much appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, of course. And he comes in with a comment that says, I don't understand the trade Tibbs narrative. He's young and provides depth at the edge. Seattle ran a 9-man D-line rotation in the Super Bowl. Keep him, in my opinion. Jason, you've heard me say it here and on Big Blue Kickoff Live during the day. I agree with you. $14 million guaranteed for the 2026 season in a contract year. I don't understand the push to want to trade him. I just don't. I know he's been banged up, so durability has been a little bit of an issue. I do understand that. But this guy is driven. He plays, believe it or not, he sets the edge well and plays the run well. I know the Giants' rush defense hasn't been very good the last 2 years, but imagine where it would be if he didn't play. We saw him miss a bunch of games last year. And look, the good news was Abdul Carter got to play more snaps, which was fine because they started using him more as a pass rusher and it seemed to work out. But the more impact players you have on your defense, the better off you're going to be. So I'm with you, Jason. You know, not only do I appreciate the super chat hit from you in this program, but I also appreciate your perspective. I just don't think it makes a ton of sense to trade Kayvon Thibodeau. Now, having said that, you certainly listen to offers. I don't think he's untouchable. You know, if by some stretch of the imagination, some team calls and says, absolutely, positively, we're going to give you a shopping cart full of stuff, well, then, yeah, you know what? Maybe you do think about it. But it's going to have to be a very special deal for me to pull the trigger if I'm the GM on Kayvon Thibodeau. Now, as I continue to battle this head cold, let's see. So I want to go back now to your chats again, folks. If you want to make a phone call or a video call, you certainly can. Let's see. Where were we as we pick up some of what we're going to do here? Let's see here. Isaac Moore, 1248 says, have to trade Kayvon if you're not planning to pay him. No, not necessarily, because here's what happens, Isaac, and this is part of what teams have learned over the years. If you have a guy in his contract year and he plays himself into a big fat contract with another team, well, free agency-wise, that gets calculated into your compensation picks. And a guy like Thibodeau, if he has a big year and the Giants don't re-sign him and he goes somewhere else, you could be looking at an equation whereby they might wind up getting a third-round compensation pick for him anyway. So why not get the production out of him in 2026, okay? And then wind up getting that third rounder down the line anyway, if that's the way it turns out. That's a double win if you're the Giants. Armand says, we don't have enough cap to pay all of the free agents what they'll be getting offered from other teams. And you're right, Armand. That's why I keep telling people, you better be prepared. Illuminor, Robinson, and Flott are the three Giants free agents who are going to get the biggest offers. You better be prepared not to chase them up the ladder because I don't believe the team is going to have the cash to retain those three players. I'm not even sure they're going to be able to retain one of them. David Cohen, 1991. I'd sign Linderbaum, Wyatt Teller, AVT, Devin Lloyd, DJ Reader, Isaiah Likely, and Leonard Floyd. Do you have any idea what the salary cap is, David? Look, I love the optimism, right? I'd love to go print Monopoly paper money too and just sign as many players as I'd like to if I were a GM in the NFL. But that's not the way the league works. X-Man 0071. The Giants will definitely restructure a few contracts to free up money, likely Dexter Lawrence and Burns. The Giants do have the ability to do that. Okay, let's make that clear. Yes, they're in the middle of the pack in terms of salary cap room as it stands right now. They can free up some money by doing some restructures and bonus money and stuff of that nature with a few of their players. And they also have a few players that have a high cap number, haven't given the complementary production that should go with that cap number. And those players are probably going to find themselves set free. Okay? So yes, there is some maneuverability here. He also says, I believe Gano, Hudson, Singletary, Runyon, and Hyatt. And I would say Okereke is a 50-50 cut. Okay. I would keep Jalen Hyatt because he's not costing you but pennies on the dollar. And why not let him have another clean slate? Last chance. This is Custard's last stand for him. And it's the final year of his contract. He knows it. You've got nothing to lose bringing him to training camp as one of your 90 players. You have nothing to lose. Let him come to camp as one of the 90 and see if he can win a spot. Okereke, I told you this before, and I stick with this. At $9 million, I think he's a bargain if he plays as well as he did during the final month and a half of last season. To Aiden Fink's point before about some players who have a larger cap number, and you may not believe the production or the snaps equate to the value of the contract, I think you could make an economic argument against the value of Hudson, of Gano, of Singletary. I don't know that you could make that same argument for Runyon. Besides, the Giants finally had an offensive line last season in the upper third of the league. Finally. It took them forever to do that. They're probably going to lose Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. We don't know if Greg Van Roten wants to play another year. So that's two potential holes. Do you really want to cut John Runyon and now have to fill in 3 of the 5 spots on your offensive line? Do you really want to do that after all the misery that the Giants have gone through with very poor offensive lines for the better part of the last decade? Do you really want to create another hole on the line besides the 2 that you may already wind up having? Ask yourself that question before you tell me that you would like to see John Runyon go away. David Cohen, 1991, says AVT could be a rotational piece. Floyd can also be a rotational player too. Again, there's only so much money in the Giants' pockets. Jesse Montañez, 4661, says Wyatt Teller's an improvement for a swap with Runyon. All right, again, here's what you have to understand. All right, let me get out the numbers. Let me do this. I'm not sure how many people understand this, so we're going to go through it. John Runyon, right now, okay, if you get rid of him, okay, if you get rid of him, you cut him before June 1st, you have $2.5 million in dead money, okay, that you're going to have to just eat on the cap, and you're going to save a little over $9 million. Now, I understand that is a decent chunk of change. How much do you think it's going to cost to sign Wyatt Teller, if that's the guy that you want to sign? Here's why I ask. Because there's a $7 million difference between the cap savings and the dead money hit with Runyon. So, if it's going to cost you more than $7 million to sign Wyatt Teller, then the math doesn't add up. It's going to cost you more money than what you're saving. Really, that's what it comes down to. Do you want to do that? Because you're going to save 9.2, but if you have to spend 2.5 dead and then sign him for anything more than 7, that's going to cost you over $9.5 million to bring in Teller. I suspect he's going to want more than that. So if you make that move, you're now shaking up the offensive line with a potential third piece. And on top of that, you're going to have to wind up paying more and hope that you get significantly more value out of Teller compared to Runyon. Can you afford to do that? I guess it's worth contemplating. It's probably worth chewing on. I don't know that my appetite says that's going to work, especially because I don't think that Teller is going to take that kind of money. I think he's going to want more. Let me see. Teller's number this past year was what? Teller made, his cap number this past season was $14 million. Okay? Wow. That was his average per year, by the way, in the last contract that he signed. It's $14 million a year. So, do you honestly believe that with the dearth of quality offensive linemen in the marketplace, that you're going to be able to get him for 7 or less? I don't think so. But that's just my opinion. Jim McHugh, 6344. Ric Serritella is great with knowledge of small schools, but would love to know how he feels about Fields, the wide receiver from Notre Dame. We did talk about Malachi Fields. I like him a lot. I think he's going to be gone in the 3rd round, and the Giants don't have a 3rd round pick. Rick tended to agree with me as you listen to the program. Jesse Montañez, 4661. He says to Ricky, Illuminor is going to get a contract. Jim McHugh says 6344 says, bless you. Yes, I am fighting these sniffles tonight. I'm not enjoying this very much, but I'm sticking with you guys at least for another 10 to 15 minutes. Isaac Moore, 1248. Again, says if you don't plan on paying him, you lose him for nothing. You have to have some foresight. Isaac Moore, you don't lose him for nothing. If he plays great, gets a big contract somewhere else, it's going to figure in the compensation package involving draft choices. So you won't lose him for nothing. That's a misnomer when people say that. It doesn't necessarily happen that way. David Cohen, 1991. I ran all those names to see how they fit with the Giants' new system. They all fit perfectly. How do you know what the new system is? You're taking a guess. We haven't talked to John Harbaugh about his system. We haven't talked to the coordinators about his new system. We haven't talked to the position coaches about what they're going to run here. I wish we had, but we haven't. There's a lot of unknowns here, folks. I get it. Everybody just thinks you just plug in the new coach. Oh, automatically, everything they ran at Baltimore, they're going to run here. I get it. That's easy to do. It's like a Lego block, right? I pick off the square that's red, and I take that red square and I just pluck it down here on this side of the board. It doesn't work that way. Isaac Moore says, take Caleb Downs or Tate. I'm a Tate guy as we sit here, but when I go to the combine, I reserve the right to change my mind as I continue to do a deep dive. You heard Ric Serritella said he's all in on Downs. He started to sell me, to be honest. I'm not gonna pull back on this. I'm starting to waffle a little bit. I'm a Tate guy right now, but I'm starting to waffle a little bit on Downs. Armand Duda says Thibodeau's already signed. I'd rather keep him than gamble on trading him for a pick. Isaac Moore says, yeah, get one more year and then lose him then. Armand Duda says, you got to sign players for the time on the contract. You aren't losing them if the time comes and you chose not to re-sign them. All right, well, these two guys are going to go at it. over the Kayvon Thibodeau situation. I'm not getting involved in that. I've already told you how I feel. C-Mac the Cable Guy says, Caden Proctor needs to end up on our team somehow, some way. Proctor's a very interesting guy. You heard Ric Serritella talk about him earlier. 6'1", 366 pounds. I think he's a guard in the NFL. I don't think he's a tackle. Last year gave up 17 pressures, 3 sacks, and only had 1.9 yards per carry before his running back was contacted. So he didn't exactly plow the defensive ends or the edge rushers off the line of scrimmage in the run game. I think he's better in a phone booth. Now, if you put him out at guard, I wrote down I loved his anchor ability, his punch, and I do think for a big man, he was able to bend somewhat with his knees. But he had trouble using his leverage. His technique was rather sloppy. And he wasn't overall very agile because, after all, he's over 360 pounds. I think you put him in a phone booth, I think he could be a guard in the NFL, not a tackle. But then again, the Giants may need a guard. So would I consider Proctor at 37? Yeah. But I probably think someone's going to take him and try to make him a tackle, and he'll get picked before the Giants get a shot to grab him at the top of the second round. All my dude says we need to fix the secondary. I understand that too. Isaac Moore says, you mean Corey Black ain't it? Ha. All my dude says, I prefer tall corners and wide receivers. Yeah, I'm the same way, Armand. You know that. You guys have been following me a long time. You know I'm always after the Spider-Man, the skyscrapers, so to speak. All right. Mikey C, 6894. The G-Men O-line should be Thomas, left guard at question mark, Linderbaum at center, Dunker at right guard, and Bo at right tackle. The Loa boys helping the line. Yeah, I know about Dunker. We all saw him. He is the Nick Gates type offensive line who was coming out in this class. And yeah, he's that kind of guy. And we all know those kinds of guys, those dogs, so to speak, along the offensive line. You can never go wrong. There's a certain amount of automatic, I don't want to say the word production because you never know about the production, but there's a certain attitude and there's a certain spark that you get from those kinds of guys on the offensive line. Mikey 6894, why nobody talks Sonny Stiles? We did talk Sonny Stiles, actually, with Rick, and he's a big Sonny Stiles fan. All my dude says, oh, I didn't know Caleb was Gary's son. Yes, Gary Downs. New York Giants, let me think now, 3rd round draft pick, I want to say, back in 94. That would have been Dan Reeves' 2nd year. I was already 10 years or so on the beat by then. Dan Reeves' 2nd year, 1994, was Gary Downs. 3rd round draft choice. He just never really panned out. He wound up with Denver, I believe, after the Giants let him go. You know, in those days, they didn't have much room for these backup running backs. They didn't do very much. You know, they had a bunch of those guys over the years behind some of their star players who were running the ball. Mikey C says, talk about Stiles again. Well, we did. So I'm glad. I'm sure that came up before Rick mentioned him, because I did bring up the linebackers and Stiles in particular. Alma Duda says, I love Fields, but being a Notre Dame's fan, I'm biased. I get it. Michael Antoniati. Oh, I love that name, Michael. 2738. Says Giants should trade 5 for 8 and another 2nd rounder and get Fields. Michael, the problem is I don't think anybody's going to want to come up and trade for the 5th pick. They always tell you if you want to trade down, you're going to have to find somebody who wants to trade up. This draft doesn't have any other quarterbacks after Mendoza that someone is going to trade up into the top 10 for. And so, in all likelihood, no one's going to want to pick up the phone and make that kind of deal. Armand Duda says, I'd take Tate over Fields, though. Well, of course you would. Cornell Tate, to me, is by far easily the best receiver in this draft and worthy of a top 5 pick. You heard what Ric Serritella said, right? Fields would absolutely be a great pick for the Giants in the 3rd round, but they don't have a 3rd round pick. And he did say that Tate would be one of the 3 guys he would consider at 5. And I'm with him on that one. Absolutely I am. Michael Antoniatti comes right back. 2738. I want to leave his number out. He says Tate's too good too. Just like the 6'4" frame. No question about it. He says plug him in. I agree. Michael also comes back and says his rating was only 5 points away from Illuminor. I'm not sure what you're talking about in terms of rating and so forth. If you're talking about analytics, grades, and ratings, I don't pay attention to any of that stuff. I believe what I see because the tape doesn't lie. I could give a horse's butt about some of these grading services that people read about on the internet. And Michael, if you don't know me, that's the way I've always been. I'm very consistent. I'm on board with J.J. Watt. Okay? I'm on board with J.J. Watt. Those player grades that you see on the internet are worthless. Michael also comes back and says, we may still get Caleb at 8. Well, I don't think Downs is less than an 8. He may not even get to 5. You heard what Rick said. He may not get to 5. He's certainly not getting to 8. Okay. Let's see what else here. We'll pass a bunch of these. Armand says you didn't even say the Jets' name. Laugh out loud. It's okay. I understand. We went through the top 4 picks. By the way, maybe we should do that. And I apologize. I do apologize. If you didn't know what the draft order is, it's the Raiders at 1, the Jets at 2, the Cardinals at 3, the Titans at 4, and the Giants at 5. If Rick and I did not make that clear when he went through his top 5 overall picks in the draft, I apologize. That's where it's at. I know if you go back into the archive and you just listen to Rick's segment, maybe we skipped over the actual team names in each of those slots. And again, I do apologize for that. Armand Duda says we need as much defensive backs help as we can get. There's no doubt. And he also thanks Ric Serritella for joining us. No question about it. Very, very happy to have him. Oh, Tudo! He is back. Massive respect to Big Paulie. Brilliant Giants live stream show as always. Greetings from our entire Italian rugby national team currently in Dublin. Cheers, mate. Well, as always, Tuto is the man, and thank you. Good luck in Dublin. I wonder, I have no idea what the weather is over there. You know, a couple of weeks back, we had a 14-inch blizzard in the New York City metropolitan area. And now with some rain today and a few warmer temperatures the last few days, we can actually see the ground again. Some of that ice has actually melted, and we are starting to see some actual ground. For a while there, I thought we were living in Iceland, and it actually moved away from the New York metropolitan area. Okay, let's see what else we have here as we go to the bottom of the hour. I've got 11 more minutes with you folks. Max V 1331 says, a lot of people are saying we're going to cut Bobby Okereke, the linebacker, to free up cap. I don't see this happening to a captain. What do you think? Here's what it comes down to. You have him right now under contract with a $9 million cap hit. Okay? If you believe that Bobby Okereke is the player you saw over the final month and a half of the season last year, after Charlie Bullen took over the defensive coordinator's role, if you believe that's the guy that's going to perform in 2026, it makes no sense to cut him, because that's a good player. That's good value. Now, I know he had 140-something tackles this year. His numbers were high. And he had some impactful plays, but not consistently enough over the course of the whole season. So I understand where some people are saying, well, for 66% of the year, it was okay, but we could do without. I can understand that line of thought. If you believe that's the real Bobby Okereke in 2026, then it's logical, perhaps, to move on. Although, remember something. You've got Micah McFadden, who is also an unrestricted free agent, coming off of a broken foot. McFadden told me at the end of the year he'd like to see who the new defensive coordinator is, but he loves it here with the Giants. He'd like to come back, and he knows he's going to have to sign a one-year prove-it contract coming off of a broken foot. The year prior, he had 100 tackles and was ascending as a player, had shown improvement every year. I do think the Giants will be able to come to an agreement to bring him back, but he is coming off of a broken foot. How much do you want to weigh that in your evaluation as you decide what you want to do with Okereke? I don't think it's a big factor, but I think it should be a factor. Because if you do cut Okereke, because if you think that the early 26 season is what he is, I'll respect that. But now you have to get yourself another inside linebacker. And maybe that prompts you to think a little bit more about Sonny Stiles with the 5th overall pick. You might just want to do that. Don't know. But if you think that Bobby Okereke is the guy who played the last month and a half of the season, which is what I think, then I would not cut him. I would not create another hole on a defense that has had trouble stopping the run for the last 2 years. So, Max, I don't think it's about the captaincy that really concerns me. That's not part of my equation. Iman Perry says, I think Kayvon Thibodeau might play well under Harbaugh if they build that wing defense for him again. Well, we know that Johnson, Denard, not Johnson. Denard Wilson is the Giants' new defensive coordinator. As I fuss through some of my papers here, I want to clean up this just a little bit here as we wrap up the show in the next few minutes. Denard Wilson is the Giants' new defensive coordinator. So, it's not Wink Martindale. It is not a blitz-happy defense. Wilson is very scientific and very specific about the details of how he uses his blitz to fool people. He is not an all-out blitzkrieg guy. I believe last year the Titans blitzed like 26% of the time, something like that. It was in the middle of the pack. Wink Martindale's a guy who's going to blitz over 40% of the time. He's just going to blitzkrieg you, and he's not pulling any punches. He says pressure breaks pipes. So he's just flooding at you nonstop, sending waves and waves of guys at you. That's not what Denard Wilson does. So please don't think that this is going to be a Wink Martindale defense, because it will not. And Armand Duda says, he's talking about Kayvon, he did play his best under Wink. I understand that, but this is not a Wink Martindale defense. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here? Mikey C6894 says, only cut Okereke if you can get Stiles. Linderbaum is worth losing every free agent on the team. Well, here's the problem with that. If you sign Linderbaum, what are you doing with JMS? I don't think Linderbaum converts to guard, and I don't think JMS converts to guard. So if you're going to throw free agent money, which, by the way, is going to be expensive, at Tyler Linderbaum, you have redundancy at center. which does you absolutely no good whatsoever. So I'm not on board with that one at all. Sean Jackson, 3203. Happy Wednesday to you, Paul. Back at you, Sean. He's one of our regulars. Is there a new extra energy around the Giants as they prep for next week's combine? Harbaugh's first as the Giants' new head coach and new staff. Haven't gotten a chance to meet the new staff yet, so I don't have a real first-hand answer for you. Mikey C6894 says, Stiles is that, I'm sure he means dude. All right. Freedom 341 NYG. Good evening, Paul. Do you think we keep Cornell flat? Will it cost too much? Go Giants. I suspect it's going to cost too much, and they probably won't be able to keep Cornell flat, which is a shame. Aiden Fink says, it's 2:18 a.m. in Dublin. Huge props to Tudo, as always, for chiming in very early in the morning. We love Tudo. He is such a loyal follower and a super chat guy as well. Always love hearing from him, and I hope his team is doing well. He never sends us the results of his matches. We don't know how well they're doing. I'm sure they're well because he's always got a very positive attitude every time we hear from him. So I'm sure they're not having a bad season, but we never get to see what their record is. Mikey C6894. Downs is a top 3 pick. He might go to the Jets. It could happen. Remember, they took Jamal Adams several years ago and thought he was going to be an all-world safety. And then that didn't turn out so well. He had the same path that Landon Collins had. Right? Adams was a Pro Bowl safety. Collins was a Pro Bowl safety. A couple years later, these guys are too stiff. They don't have enough range. They can't cover anybody. They're more box linebackers. All right, guess what? Now they're not all pros anymore. I know. I get it. Finally, Sean Jackson, 3203. Paul, if the Giants don't re-sign Illuminor and the top draft offensive lineman, tackles, and Caleb Downs are all available at 5, how do the tackles rate versus Downs on defense, and which choice would benefit the Giants more? Well, I don't think there's any doubt about this. When you look at those two offensive tackles, neither one of them, Fano or Manuoa, neither one of those guys are worth the 5th overall pick in the draft. I don't believe that. Ric Serritella doesn't believe that. I would not pick either of those offensive tackles over Caleb Downs at 5. Absolutely not. If it's a choice between the two offensive tackles and Downs, I think you have to take Caleb Downs. I don't think there's any question about that. Armand Duda says, it's hard to be sure of players on defense with the poor defensive coordinator performance we had. Most of the Giants' defense underperformed last year. I think everybody knows that. And the question becomes, will a number of those guys who we believe are better players than they showed bounce back in 2026? That is a huge piece of this puzzle that John Harbaugh has to solve. Mikey C6894, Stiles and Okereke would be a neen gag team. Dave Del Call says, Stiles or Delane at 5 if you had to pick one or the other. I would probably go Stiles. I think, and I appreciate Rick was very high on Delane as the top corner in this draft, and I agree with him. I don't think there's any doubt. Mansour Delane is the top corner in this draft. But I would probably go Stiles. Lenny Sarro says there are many moves to be made, and he's right about that. I think it's important to trust Harbaugh's process. Do you think they keep Wan'Dale Robinson? He was a favorite of Jackson Dart's. He was a favorite of Dart's. They have a great connection. The problem is, I think Wan'Dale Robinson is going to get a very nice chunk of change to go somewhere else. And I don't think the Giants are going to wind up chasing him up the economic ladder all the way to the bank. So I suspect you're going to have to be prepared that Wan'Dale Robinson is going to get paid to wear somebody else's jersey next season, as unfortunate as that may seem. All right. Well, that'll do it for tonight's edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live. We do thank you folks for joining us once again tonight. We thank Ric Serritella of AllAccessFootball.com and the publisher of the NFL Draft Bible since 2002. You can reach Rick at NFL Draft Bible on Twitter. You can reach me at GiantsWFAN as always. Please keep it locked on to my Twitter page at GiantsWFAN, and I will have more information as we get closer to the Combine, which is all next week in Indianapolis. The plan is to do a live Combine show next week, one of those nights. I'm not sure if we totally locked it in yet, but it will be based on what the schedule is for the media availabilities in terms of the positions of the players who are going to talk, as well as when or if Giants GM Joe Shane talks, and when or if Giants head coach John Harbaugh talks. I would like to be able to do a live show from the Combine the night after or the night of their conversations so that we can talk about them with you, recap a lot of what was said, and try to figure out the pieces to the puzzle as the Giants move forward. So again, on X or Twitter, if you prefer to call it that, at GiantsWFAN. That is my handle. That is where I promise to keep you updated on the status of a Combine show next week. Who knows? I might even do 2 Combine shows next week. If you guys wind up just pounding the clicks and you demand that we have to do it, I might wind up doing 2 Combine shows next week. We did one last year, and it was a huge success. We'll see. We'll probably do 2 this year too, because I expect that you guys are going to want to absolutely flood the program. Well, that'll do it once again for the Big Blue Breakdown Live. I'm Paul Dottino. As always, this show is available on the archive on the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel. And by the way, if you missed any of Ric Serritella's NFL Combine preview, he came on at 15 minutes into the program and spent a good half hour with us talking about not only the Combine, but how the Giants' machinations may result in trying to get some better players as they move forward into the 2026 season. That'll do it. I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you next time.